Hi everyone, my name is Rose, also known as TA Summers. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my best of list for 2022 in terms of the books that I have read. So I have quite a lengthy list to go through. What I did was kind of broke down my picks across several different categories. Some categories have winners and runners up, like based on all of the 100 books that I read for the year of 2022. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump in. So these are my best books of 2022, my picks across these different genres, and I hope you enjoy. Just so that we're not here forever, this is going to be pretty rapid fire. I'm not going to go into too much detail regarding what each of these books are about. These are just my general picks and general reflections, just so you have a general idea of what to expect. I also have some general rules to what I'm going to list in this overarching list of best reads for 2022. First thing is no repeats in categories, unless it's kind of a favorite author that's paired with the pick in another category. I don't think there are any repeats in this list. I double checked it just before I started rolling the camera to make sure there weren't any duplicates, and I think I did a fair job of picking very unique picks for each of the categories of books that I read this year. Second rule would be no rereads from previous years. I'm going to say sorry to Octavia Butler, who I read Parable of the Sower for the first time in a little bit this year, and I love that book. And also Nafisa Azad, who I revisited a book that I read this year, but I'm going to do a collective video on her books in the future in terms of this year. Also, I am not including partial reads. I partially read a lot of books in 2022, but unfortunately there were so many books that I started reading but didn't finish reading, so I can't include them in this wrap up. So I'm sorry, there are a lot of books that I wish that could have been on this list that I actually started, and you can even see in some of my videos from 2022 in terms of stuff that I put on my TBR. I started them, but unfortunately I didn't finish them, and I have stuff that like even dates all the way back to August of 2022 that I haven't finished. But I'm hoping in 2023 I'll be a lot better about that, especially since I want to reduce the amount of book hopping that I do, essentially reading multiple books at one time and trying to focus my attention on finishing the books that I'm already reading before moving on to other ones. So that's a rule for this list as well. Some of these categories, as I mentioned, will have runners up and with alongside winners. So I'll mention those when they come up. And many of these books may not have been published in 2022. Some of them are, but others of them may not be. So just generally speaking, just to make you aware of that. And since that takes care of all the rules, let's go ahead and dive in. For favorite fiction book, generally speaking, this particular pick was one that I was very intentional on picking because some people have classified this as a romance. Some people have classified this particular book as women's fiction. Ultimately speaking, I think it could teeter between the two based on the themes and the relationships and the respective discussions and the portrayal of the characters for certain things. But I do think it is a romance also because it does have a happily ever after, since that's one of the stipulations on what a romance can be. But it may not necessarily be every person's cup of tea. This was from an author who I read for the first time in 2022, very, very highly regarded. And this was something that I really liked in terms of not only showcasing the chemistry between the two book agents who are rivals, but also showcasing Nora's respective relationship with her sister and the unfoldings of what she has to deal with when she's in this small town in North Carolina. And you probably already know what I'm picking for this. For best fiction book general, I named Book Lovers by Emily Henry as my pick. I really, really enjoyed this book. It exceeded my expectations in terms of what I expected from it. I loved it. I loved the audiobook narration by Julia Whalen, and I've already talked about it in one of my wrap ups, but that is my pick for best general fiction of 2022, Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Next category is favorite historical fiction, and this is distinct from favorite historical romance, which I will get to later on in this video. So, for favorite historical fiction, this particular book definitely made me cry, and it deals with such a heavy topic that trades between the past and the present in terms of taking place in 1970s Alabama and then progressing to the modern day, about a nurse who works on behalf of these two little black girls who are grown up in poverty. They're subjected to medical procedures that transform their lives in a way that is devastating, and is up to this nurse who takes it upon herself to make things right and advocate for the girls. This was one of my favorite reads of 2022. For favorite historical fiction, Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez. It worked so well for me. It was a book of the month pick. As heartbreaking as this particular book was, I loved it so very much, and it was definitely one of my strongest reads of 2022. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I thought the audiobook narration was very well done, because I also listened to it in audiobook form, and I definitely see myself going back to it and ranking it as one of my favorite reads, even overall, even with the difficult subject matter. So that is Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez, my favorite historical fiction for 2022, and it is actually based on actual events. So for favorite nonfiction, I had a hard time choosing between different books because I read quite a bit of like nonfiction in the year of 2022, and because I had such a hard time deciding between these 3 books, I decided I would just go ahead and tell you in no particular order what my favorite nonfiction reads were for 2022. First one was one that I read very early on in the year via audiobook, and it was one of the finalists for the Goodreads Choice Awards in the previous year in 2021. This was The Woman They Could Not Silence by Kate Moore, and it is a compulsively readable biography of Elizabeth Packard, who was forcefully confined by her husband to a mental institution in 1860 because she challenged a lot of his ideas. He was a pastor. She was trying to do her best to take care of their kids. He decided to, because he had the authority to do so, put her away in this mental institution, and the book chronicles her attempts to escape that mental institution over the course of, I believe, about 3 years. This book was not only informative, but it was also infuriating to follow, but I found it also a fascinating read. Second favorite nonfiction read of 2022 was the actual nonfiction winner of the Goodreads Choice Awards for 2022, Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. I was not surprised that it won overall pick for the Goodreads Choice Awards. I really enjoyed this book. It was a very thorough examination of different emotions, 87 of them, in which Brown unpacks a lot of the science and the study of all these different human emotions, and trying to better delve in terms of how these allow us to connect not only with ourselves but with each other. Basically, like the landscape of how these emotions work socially, and also focusing on Brene Brown's trademark research in the field of shame and a lot of different things. So it was very illuminating. I enjoyed it. I was able to read it both across the physical book form, which has a lot of illustrations and expansions as well, but also an audiobook form from my library. So I kind of I read the physical copy first, and then I read the audiobook not too long afterward to kind of supplement it, like, and see what the difference between them were. But I think both mediums do a really good job of getting into its subject matter, and I think it was wonderfully well written. So that was definitely one of my favorites of 2022, Atlas the Heart by Brene Brown. So the last nonfiction book that I would like to mention and feature was also one of my favorite reads that I was able to get as a galley from NetGalley. I have yet to write a comprehensive review of it because I'm so intimidated by the fact that I have to, like, I won't have enough words to say how wonderful this particular book was, especially for me as a writer and also matching my identity. This is Black Love Matters, edited by Jessica P. Pride, and there is it's an extensive group of essays from a lot of Black writers who talk about the importance of Black love and Black romance in literature, and it spans across a wide array of topics and from a lot of well-known Black writers, including Beverly Jenkins and so many other writers who took the time to contribute to this collection. I was definitely loved it. I definitely see myself keeping it in my collection and also coming back to it even years after the fact. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really thankful I had the chance to read it in 2022. Okay, next category will would be favorite mystery and suspense. So how do I sell this particular novel? So if you are you familiar if you are a fan of the series You, whether it's the Netflix series or the book series thing, and you like Pretty Little Liars and you like YA, The Obsession by Jesse Q. Sutano may be for you, especially from the synopsis that I'm going to give you here. If you, would you like to read a story where the guy stalking the girl gets in over his head with the aforementioned girl who seems keen on keeping secrets of her own, even potentially to kill? So it's basically a boy stalks girl, boy sees girl kill, and falls in love with girl, but yet girl might want to kill him in the process. So I'm not gonna spoil uh, The Obsession by Jesse Q. Sutano, but it pleasantly surprised me in terms of how much I engaged with it. I gave it a strong 4 stars, and it was one of my favorite mystery suspenses of 2022. Though it is a YA novel, I really enjoyed The Obsession. I definitely count it among one of my favorites and unexpected surprises, surprise favorites of 2022. So, favorite sci fi book of 2022. This one was difficult. I had a hard time deciding between two different books that I ended up reading in 2022, and I decided to go with the one that I ranked the highest among them. This is one that I got as a galley, but I also purchased the audiobook. I really, really enjoyed the sci fi horror elements of this. It felt like I was in this either atmospheric movie or atmospheric game where I was following along with the characters in this mysterious environment in which they were trying to figure out what the mystery behind this particular ghost ship. And you probably already know what I'm talking about in terms of mentioning that, especially with respect to the heroine who is presumed to be the only survivor of this expedition and then has to go on another expedition in order to find out what actually transpired on this abandoned ship in space. This is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. So, favorite fantasy book of 2022 is an easy pick for me. It's Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, and I also got this as a galley from NetGalley, but I also purchased a copy, originally indie, but reprinted under Tor and given wider distribution. It was just a lovely, cozy fantasy with some stakes, although very light stakes in terms of following an orc named Viv who runs a coffee shop and is going through the day-to-day process of the ups and downs of maintaining the shop while collectively meeting a colorful cast of characters and essentially trying to navigate these different trials and tribulations as she's running her coffee shop. So I really enjoyed it. It was one of my favorite fantasy reads of on 2022. There were other fantasy books that I was able to pick up, but unfortunately was not able to finish. But of the ones that I finished, Legends and Lattes definitely took it for me, and I loved it so much. So, favorite horror of 2022. This one was a bit of a harder pick for me because there were a number that I did read that some of them were ones that I wasn't able to finish in time to be able to put on this list. And I think if I had finished the book in time before the end of 22, I would have given this to The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. But I think I'm going to focus on a unique pick, which is classified as horror, but it may not necessarily be horror in terms of the traditional definition, even though it does have certain elements that make it a horror. This is White Horse by Erica T. Worth, and it was nominated under the horror category in the first round of the Goodreads Choice Awards. Essentially, this is following a woman who is trying to figure out the mystery behind her mother's spirit following her, and essentially untangling a lot of different things in terms of her family and like her estranged family, and figuring out is feels more like a mystery than it does a horror, but I understood why it was put as a horror, especially with the references to Stephen King and other things within it. Is White Horse by Erica T. Worth. I believe I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I really enjoyed it. Next category up is favorite romance contemporary. I had a hard time deciding what book to pick because I did read a lot of contemporary romance in 2022. And specifically, if I were to have an award for my favorite author of 2022 in terms of the author I read the most from in 2022, it would be Christina C. Jones. And Christina C. Jones is the author of several wonderful contemporary romances, especially Black romance. I read all of the Night Shift series, which includes Equivalent Exchange, Prior Affair, and Faded Memories, and all of those were delightful reads for me. But I think if I had to go with the book that really resonated with me the most, and I included it as part of my 10 all-time favorite reads, best written reads video, I really enjoyed Behind the Scenes, and I thought it was a wonderful following of both the journeys of Pierre and Logan, especially Logan's journey. I identified so much with Logan in terms of what she goes through in this particular novel, and some of the emotions and some of the personal ordeals that she goes through in the novel. And I was rooting for their relationship, even as I followed both of them for within their respective industries and being able to be together. So definitely my favorite romance contemporary pick for 2022, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to read it. Next category is favorite romance historical. Give it to Miss Bev, y'all. Give it to Miss Bev. So my pick for my favorite romance of 2022 was To Catch a Raven by Beverly Jenkins, and I love this particular historical romance so much. It is part of the Women Who Dare series, which also includes the previous 2 books, which are both Rebel as well as Wild Rain, and I'll put the covers of those for your reference up here. But you can actually read To Catch a Raven on its own, but it does work as part of this particular series. I loved following Raven, who is a grifter who kind of cons her way through all these different situations, but she kind of hits this rocky road when she is forced to work with a guy named Braxton, in which they have to play a married couple, play a married couple in order to pull off retrieving a stolen copy of the Declaration of Independence. And it's such a wonderfully immersive read following these 2 characters and their respective chemistry, as well as them trying to pull off this particular pairing while also kind of navigating their feelings and their relationship along the way. So I really enjoyed it. I gave this a strong 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I loved it so much. One of these times I will probably do a collective video on the books that I've read from Beverly Jenkins. She's a classic author in her own right, and I really love the journey that I have been able to take with many of her novels. So that is To Catch a Raven by Beverly Jenkins, my pick for favorite romance historical. So this might be an unexpected category for me. So the next one is my favorite romance, which is either sci-fi or fantasy. And this was an easy pick for me, considering the compilation that I read from this year, from Alona Andrews. My pick for the best romance for my favorite romance that is sci-fi and fantasy is Silver Shark by Alona Andrews from the Kinsman universe compilation, and I'll put the cover of it here for your reference. I really love the fact that this was about a disgraced soldier of war who is sent to a planet to with a new identity and having to mask her particular abilities and having to thrive in this particular environment while also falling in love with her boss who doesn't know who she is. And it's this intense kind of like dynamic that you don't know when the other shoe will drop, and then when it does, even as you see their chemistry play up between each other, it ramps up to that point where it's very steamy and very nice to see that kind of tension play out in a way that I felt was satisfying. I loved it so much, and it's definitely among my favorites from Alona Andrews in terms of their collective work. And I can't wait to dive more into the Kinsman universe, especially with the third book in the series, which is, I believe, Fated Blades. So that is Silver Shark by Alona Andrews. Loved it so much, and that is my favorite romance for sci-fi or fantasy that I read this year. Trying to tell myself to take breaks in between because I know this is going to be a long video to film. Hopefully not too long to edit, but since we're going through here, I hope you're having a favorite beverage or sitting cozy, and hope you're enjoying the picks so far. So without further ado, we're going to keep going. Now we come to the favorite graphic novel, or my favorite graphic novel or comic for the year of 2022. And I actually have a winner and a runner up. And so for the winner, which is an adult graphic novel, I picked, and this is probably a surprise to no one, Wash Day Diaries by Jamila Rouser and Robin Smith. I loved this book so much. I loved following women that are in here, following their respective friendships and their journeys through, all centered around the theme of doing their hair and also navigating a lot of rocky road things in their day-to-day lives. It was so well written, it was so well illustrated, and I'm definitely looking forward to reading more from their work in the future, as well as even more graphic novels like that. I would love to see more of that. The runner up that I'm going to say is a graphic novel that is teen, and it's no surprise because I read it in the month of October and it was a very fitting read. It was Hollow by Shannon Waters, Brendan Boyer White, and Bernice Neal, and it was a very unique retelling of the legend of Sleepy Hollow, following Izzy Crane being the new kid coming into town and essentially exploring the town of Sleepy Hollow and all of its very sometimes cute and sometimes harrowing mysteries, and essentially finding friendship and grappling with all of these different things that are going on. So I really enjoyed it. I loved the relationships of the characters, and I loved the animation of it, and it was just so well drawn on and so well done. I really enjoyed it. Next up, we have my favorite manga of 2022, and we have both a winner and a runner up for this category. Winner is probably no surprise. I read the whole collective volumes of A Silent Voice by Yoshitoki Oima. I have gushed about how well this manga series established the relationship between a reformed bully and the girl that he bullied, in terms of navigating a rekindling of their relationship and essentially navigating their way through a lot of different harrowing situations up to the point of graduation. I enjoyed it. It was one of my favorite series. It's become one of my favorite all-time manga series, and I am appreciative that I had the chance to read it all this year. The runner up that I'm going to say is still an ongoing series, and I've actually ordered the seventh volume to come in for this. I read 6 volumes of it in 2022. This is Given by Natsuki Kizu, and I talk about it also on my channel in one of my previous wrap ups for the 30 and 30 manga challenge. I really enjoyed this music series of four guys who are navigating their relationships as well as trying to make it in a music band. It was so well done, and I'm really loving it. It's funny, it's definitely unique, and it's definitely one that really tugged at my heartstrings when I had the chance to pick it up, and I'm looking forward to continuing that series even in 2023. So next up, I have several young adult categories that I'm going to go through in terms of my best of picks for 2022. First one I'm going to start off is with best young adult general, and this is basically including contemporary and things like that. My I picked a winner, and I also picked a runner up for this. So if I were to pick my favorite overall pick for 2022 for young adult in terms of the general, speaking of books that I picked up, and I picked up quite a bit of young adult this year, I would give it to Hannah Alcaff's Queen of the Tiles, which I thought was a wonderful story following a girl who is participating in a Scrabble tournament and trying to investigate events leading up to the death of her best friend in the year before, while her best friend was playing within the Scrabble tournament. I wouldn't say that it's a thriller. It's definitely a mystery, and it's definitely a story of grief. I really appreciated reading it, and I really enjoyed the writing style as well as following the characters as well. And I gave this a strong 4 stars, especially with the audiobook narration as well. The runner up that I would say for my pick for best young adult in terms of the general category is Trickster Drift by Ian Robinson. And I talked about this as being the second book in the Trickster trilogy. I really enjoyed reading it during the Skoda Readathon and also following Jarrett's journey, not only navigating, trying to survive the day to day in terms of college and everyday life essentials, but also navigating what he's becoming as the son of the trickster. And so I'm reading the last book in that series now, and I'm really enjoying it so far. And so I hope to have a comprehensive review of that up on my channel as soon as possible. But I really enjoyed Trickster Drift, and I'm glad that I've been able to continue with this series by Eden Robinson. Next up, we have Best Young Adult Historical, and this was an easy pick for me, and I've talked about it on my channel as well as in my review on Goodreads and on my blog. And I've also talked about being happy that it made the finals of the Goodreads Choice Awards, but unfortunately didn't win. This is I Must Betray You by Rusa Petties, and I thought this was a wonderful story set in the late 1980s of Romania, following a boy who is basically like turned into a spy and has to spy against his will on his family and friends in terms of working with the government. But then he realizes, in terms of this particular dictatorship, he has to take matters into his own hands and navigate that difficult situation of whether he risk betraying his friends and his family, or he goes against the government in his own way during the events of the fall of this particular dictatorship during the 1980s in Romania. It was wonderfully written, and I loved how evocative the writing was. As usual, Rusa Petties has a way of getting into her narratives that really like speak to her strong characterization, her attention to emotions, and attention to detail in terms of the environments that she evokes. And I really, really enjoyed this read. It was one of my all-time favorite books for this particular year, and it was definitely my pick for best young adult historical of 2022. Okay, this next category makes me smile. Best young adult sci-fi or fantasy, and this is a very easy pick for me. Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. This was so wonderful. I loved following Yadriel and Julian through their respective journeys. I've talked about this in my September wrap up, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but I loved this book so much. I loved the drawing of the celebration of the Dia de los Muertos, as well as following the characters and the harrowing situations they have to face, and also the friendships and the relationships that are drawn within the novel. It is so well done. It was definitely among my favorite picks for 2022, and my pick for best young adult sci-fi or fantasy. Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. Wonderfully, wonderfully well done. I forgot to say that that was the particular winner of my choice for this particular category, but there's also a runner up for best young adult sci-fi or fantasy, and I read it or read the runner up earlier this year, which completely blew me away in terms of surprising me for how well it was done. The runner up that I chose for best young adult sci-fi or fantasy was The Good Luck Girls by Charlotte Nicole Davis, and it is the first in a duology, which is essentially a YA Western dystopia following five girls who escape their confines of this particular environment and have to survive in the wilderness, as well as being potentially being portrayed in this Western environment while surviving the elements and also trying to escape their pursuers. It was wonderfully well done. I'm definitely looking forward to reading the sequel sometime this year, and it is part of a duology. I'll put the cover up here for your reference. It was redesigned. This is the cover that came with my particular edition, but it also has a redesigned cover, and then you'll see the redesigned cover here. But I loved it so much. I thought it was very well done for what it presented, and I'm definitely excited to read the next in the series. So for best middle grade for me in the year of 2022, I have a winner and I have also a runner up. So my pick for my favorite middle grade read of 2022 is Answers in the Pages by David Levithan. I have talked about this in my previous wrap up. It is a wonderful coming of age story that highlights the reality of book banning from the eyes of a kid who sees his mother pursuing the process of banning the book that he is reading in class because she objects to the content in the book. And it's a wonderfully well done story in terms of showing this boy who stands up for his right to be able to read while also navigating three different stories. It's the main character story, it's the story within the story of the snippets of the book that was actually banned, which is really cute because it's called The Adventurers. And then also navigating a previous story in which two boys navigate their friendship and even something more when a new kid arrives in his class. So it's, and that previous story actually ties in very well to the overarching story and actually has to do with the events that lead up to all of them tying in so well. And I was very impressed with the way that David Levithan drew all of these narratives together to have a very satisfying experience and also say something very significant about the reality of book banning and also just essentially like teaching kids you can speak up for what you want in terms of what you want to read. So I thought it was wonderful. I give it 5 out of 5 stars. I love the audiobook. It was definitely one of my favorite reads of 2022. My pick for the runner-up of Best Middle Grade for 2022 is actually Witchlings by Claribel A. Ortega. And this was a wonderful kind of like magic schools type story in which it follows a young witch who is trying to get into a notable coven. It's a very charming series. I loved reading it. I don't have a full review of it yet on my Goodreads quite yet, but I'm definitely looking forward to writing that. And it was definitely one of my favorite books of 2022 in middle grade. And now we come to the last category, which is my favorite children's read of 2022. And this one is kind of an odd pick for me because this was one that I had as a galley that I forgot that I had as a galley and got approved for it back in 2016, but I was able to pick up the comic this year. I am very, very familiar with the Strawberry Shortcake franchise. This is the character that I grew up with, and it's very different from the different iterations that Strawberry Shortcake has taken over the years. So this particular book was called Strawberry Shortcake Volume 1, Return of the Purple Pie Man. And if you know the Purple Pie Man, he is one of the essential villains of the series of the Strawberry Shortcake universe. So this particular volume, comic volume, is a reboot that started with the first volume in 2016, which follows Strawberry Shortcake and her friends and the Berrykins in various adventures, but the main line story essentially has Strawberry and her friends trying to raise money for the Berrykins in a quick fashion. So Strawberry has to enter a baking competition, and with a cash prize amount that will help them. So essentially, Strawberry enters this competition, starts baking, but then she starts realizing, along with her friends, that there are these mysterious things that are going around. It, like, in terms of sabotaging of the other contestants, in terms of making them screw up and drop out of the competition. So straw and we know who it is, y'all. We know who it is.
The cloud is growing again, even faster than before. Oh, that pie man!
um but essentially Strawberry has and her friends have to navigate both trying to stay in the competition and also finding out who's behind the series of mysterious events. But overall, I thought this was a very charming comic. I really enjoyed it, and I definitely loved reading it and revisiting it in 2022. So Volume 1 of Strawberry Shortcake Return of the Purple Pie Man was one of my favorite reads in 2022 for favorite children's read. And that is it for my favorites of 2022. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to see when I upload videos and more content like this on my channel. Thank you again for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next video.